Okay, so a warm welcome to Sharren Haskel, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Israel. Joining us also is my co-host and regular contributor, Dr. Leif Knudsen, who is actually making a series about the Israeli election these days because somebody has to do it in Norway. Welcome, Sharren. How are you?
Hi, thank you very much for hosting me. It's a great pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you for taking the time. I understand these are busy days in Israel with
Oof.
everything going on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Let us know, for us who are in Norway and around the world, what's it like in Israel these days, and how are you holding up? And also later on, I thought we'd speak a little bit about what's going on with Iran and all of this stuff on your
Yeah.
borders.
Well, as you can imagine, it's absolutely crazy. Everything is very tense. On the outside, we're fighting a seven-fronted war against seven different enemies and borders. This has been going on for the last 3 years in trying to defend our country and to defend our people. So there's a lot of difficulty, especially here in politics, and constraints as well. There's huge challenges, security challenges, economical challenges, and the issues within Israel as well. Um, I, I can tell you so much also. This is not just a military front. Because our enemies have been using since the beginning of the war, international institutions as a political tool against Israel. So we have that front as well. We have, the media and social media where there is so much money going on in order to spread lies and propaganda against Israel, like full fabrications that you would hear. There's the legal arena where, the international legal institutions have been weaponized as a tool of war against Israel. So it's been very, very challenging outwards, but it's very challenging inwards as well. There's economical difficulties, hundreds of thousands of people who've been recruited to go to the front line, and how that affects the children at school who don't see their father or their mother. You can just imagine what's happened for us at home with the children, with the challenges of bombardment of ballistic missiles, children running into shelters, and how they day-to-day life looks when one of the parents is out in the front line and they don't see them for many months at certain points. You understand the economical challenges. I mean, Israel have really challenged through it, but any country who is at war, take so much resources in order to defend the country and to protect it that it has a huge impact economically. Um, and then, we are going in a couple of weeks into elections. So if that wasn't enough, there are huge debates here in Israel. We have probably 11, 12 parties. Each one is trying to pull and push towards their direction. So there's a lot of fighting here in the parliament, a lot of legislation. It's been crazy, as I just tried to describe it from the start.
With all of this going on, do you feel like Israel still has the social fabric to push through all of this and still have the cohesiveness that people are still feeling like they're on Team Israel, everybody's fighting for the same cause, and you're able to push through?
So I think there's one thing above all with our differences, and our fighting is that our country, okay, is our homeland. It's part of our identity, and we'll do everything in our capability to defend it. Okay, to protect our brave and incredible soldiers who have contributed so much, who have paid so many prices so that we can live safely. And this thing is above everything. Um, do I think, that now we truly understand what's at stake? I think most of the Israeli civilians do. And I have to say, when we see also the rise of anti Semitism all around the world, in countries where we never imagined anti-Semitism will hit like a plague in certain parts of the world. And we see that. And we really understand now how necessary, the only Jewish democracy, the only Jewish home where we are able to defend ourselves and protect ourselves by ourselves.
Yeah. So, just if you want to give us a little bit of introduction, you have to assume that most Norwegians know very little about Israeli politics. And one thing that I thought was kind of interesting in your case is that you're openly in disagreement with your own government on certain issues. And the reason I brought that up is because you were talking about, this shared effort in defending the country, but there is one or two groups that are completely outside of that, namely the Haredim, and to a lesser extent also the Arab population. So explain to me how somebody who's a member of a cabinet also can be so actively in opposition to it.
In opposition to what has been happening with the ultra orthodox and with okay, so the thing is, I think that not just in Israel, and maybe in a way, I think Norwegian will be better. It will be easier to understand because I don't know exactly the internal politics in Norway, but I'm sure you can see how all around the world, politics is becoming less about the values, the ideas like socialism and capitalism, freedom versus equality, or, being very hawkish about security or very, appeasing towards things. It's Politics is becoming more and more personal, and it is about the person and not about the agenda or the ideology. And I think we've seen it very much. Look on the United States, which is some of the biggest example I saw now. There's a Democrat, person who's running in the Democrat Party to the election in Maine. Okay, this person had like a Nazi tattoo. Women's have complained about him. Okay, the Democrat Party, who's always been, trying to portray itself as a beacon of values and women's rights and, equality and things like that. And they support a literally someone who has a Nazi background, who has, spoke against women, who was, now we know, probably even violent against women. To be able to put aside your values, your ideology in order to win, because it's about a person. For example, how do you defeat Trump? It's either you're in Trump's camp or you're against Trump. Okay. This has become more and more politics in many countries around the world, I think. And it has become like that more and more in Israel too. And for me, speaking about our challenges with the ultra Orthodox community and the Arab communities as well, is talking about classic political positioning, about the values that I believe in, which are very hawkish on security issues. I'm, very right wing on economical issues. Okay. Very liberal to liberate our economy, less taxes, less regulations, and viewing it from that point of view of freedom versus equality, socialism versus capitalism and everything. And that's why I'm very comfortable in criticizing and fighting against different legislations that are coming now, or trying to exempt to population from the duty of what is inscribed by law. There isn't any community who can be above the law. And this is really what I'm fighting for. So, regardless of going internally to the little, sections of the laws and everything, those are the principles. And I feel very comfortable with criticizing it while backing fully the government, especially on the war efforts to defend our country and to protect our civilians, okay? Our foreign policy and how we approach it. On the contrary, if anything, you'll hear me criticizing it that we're not, assertive enough with our foreign policy. And in many cases, we actually appease people who fight against us in the international arena. So, this is how I see the balance. I try to push myself as further as possible from those personalization of politics.
So that brings me to the next question, which is that I just as an intro, I've had the pleasure of getting to know a lot of the diplomats that have been in Norway from Israel lately, and they've really should get a lot of recognition. They have not had it easy, and they've done a heroic and exemplary job on every front. So just so you know that, but also, how do you, because Norway tends to think that we're the most important country in the world, of course. And so what is the story with the bilateral relationship between Israel and Norway? We don't even have an ambassador here now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it had deteriorated, and I know the current ambassador is trying to do really hard work in trying to reconstruct and build bridges, and I'm in communication with them, and he's really he's doing his utmost effort. I know whenever we have events, or we have briefings, or we go out in the field to show what is happening on our northern border, our southern border, the humanitarian aid. He always comes in order to get informed of what's happening and trying to report that. I assume later on. But I think the policy of the Norwegian government for far too long, especially during the last years, have been only one-sided, and it's been damaging. Norway has always was able to put itself in the middle, and that position Norway in a special position where they can be, the like the center who are trying to mediate. So the mediator, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you can only be a mediator if you don't take a side, and then you try to compromise between those two sides. Once the Norwegian government have made it very, very clear for quite a few years now that they are on one side. They are pro-Palestinian. They take actions with the Palestinians. They take actions against Israel. Okay. It is very clear for us that they cannot be mediators anymore. So they're not in that position anymore. And that's why Norway has lost a lot of its credibility and a lot of the capability to be at the center of, the actions of what is happening. And it started, especially during the last 3 years, with a very, very clear message that we've received when the King of Norway, when he wanted to send condolences, and he have sent condolences to the Palestinians numerous times in the past, but he wanted to send condolences after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, where Hamas entered our communities, raped little girls, burnt entire families, executed, one home after another and put it on fire. Literally, they came with the intention of genocide. We were at mourning, okay? And to send sympathy, is that so hard? When the foreign ministry have recommended not to send sympathies, that was very, very clear that something is completely broken there. The fact that you cannot even sympathize with people who have just been through one of the worst tragedies since the foundation of their country, where little children have experienced such brutality, okay? Horrific brutality, where more than 250 civilians are being held captive by terrorist organizations who are torturing them, raping them, abusing them every single day. And do you have no empathy? Can you not relate to something like that? I mean, you just need to be human, that's all. So this is far worse than what we've thought. on how Norway have taken a position to side with Palestinians time and time again. We see some of the joint effort of going and recognizing a Palestinian state, for example. Now, you need to understand what message it sent, not in Europe, but here in the Middle East. When Norway recognized that, it means that here in the Middle East, they have rewarded a terrorist organization for the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. That message resonates among all terrorist organizations. That when they create such death and destruction, such horrific violence, okay, crimes against humanity, real crimes, they will be rewarded by the state of Norway. When we see and we have full evidence how Norwegian governments and, Norwegian tax money, okay, that is meant to go to humanitarian aid, go into an organization that is sponsoring Hamas, the terrorist organization whose aim is to kill us. They literally send money to the organization and they are using it not for humanitarian aid, but to pay the salaries for those who have murdered us, for weapons, for using the facilities as military bases and military headquarters. Okay? That's the reality. And they can dig their head in the sand as much as they want, but they know full facts. All the evidence are on the table. They've been publicized. They know it. So they cannot hide behind empty words. And, this has been going on for years. I have here, a whole book, okay, on how the European Union, with your taxes, okay, and special projects of the Norwegian government, to pay for the planning of areas of Palestinian communities. They are literally sending your money to take Palestinian communities and to illegally occupy land that is legally known as Israeli land. By the way, by the Oslo Agreement that was signed in your capital. They pay for buildings, for constructions of schools, because they feel like schools will not be demolished by Israel on illegal land. Okay, they literally steal Israeli land to bring illegal towns. They buy, big water containers so that they can be there. They buy, little electricity, power, mechanics, so they can have some electricity. You literally pay for what is called, the war in the areas of Judea and Samaria, the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. What is Palestinian land? What is Israeli land? Most of it is registered. Okay, you have area A, B, C. A lot of it is registered either by Palestinians and by Israelis authorities. Much of it have been determined by the High Supreme Court, on different questions of who's this land belong to. And, many of those communities where Norway is directly involved, okay, in building illegal communities are, the fracture points between Israelis and Palestinians. When you see those challenges, those conflicts in the field, the violence that erupt between, Jews and Arabs about the land, Norway have taken part in creating a reality of that conflict. It's funding it. And so it's not a surprise where, the government has been pushing, the labeling laws where they refuse to buy Jewish products, okay, label the Jewish products and things like that. It's part of a plan of, more than 20 and 30 years where they are investing your taxpayers' money, okay, in building a reality of a Palestinian state on Israeli land as well. And they'll use every effort in order to boost that, including those legislations of boycotting products, Jewish products from these areas and things like that. So
What
where is our relationship? The situation is not good, and unfortunately, the Norwegian government have took a one-sided approach in regards to the Israeli and the Arabs, and I have to say a one-sided approach in the global war between radical Islamists and the values of freedom.
do you think Norway has lost its moral compass?
Um, I say it with such a heavy heart because I know the Norwegian people and the Norwegian community. I know how much, peace and the values of tolerance and freedom are so important to them. But yes, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Seriously, after the Iranian regime, the fanatical regime, have butchered and slaughtered their own children, more than 30,000 of their own kids in the streets who are going and protesting for their freedom, raping little girls in such brutal ways that they were hospitalized, okay, and had to go through surgeries after those brutal rapes. What do you think of this fanatical regime? I mean, the foreign minister is sending the deputy foreign minister to go and into Iran to discuss matter, to have special appointment. I mean, what side are you on? The side of those who are fighting for freedom? Or those who are fanatical terrorists who are butchering and killing them? You tell me. Have Norway lost its compass?
One thing I'm curious about, Sharren, and that is, Middle Eastern politics better than we do, and probably than most of the people in Norway do. But it seems to me that, this kind of being a useful idiot that Norway has been in this playing doesn't earn it any respect with the other Middle Eastern regimes. I mean, the Palestinians are not idiots either. They can see that these are people who aren't very principled, who don't have a lot of backbone, who don't know the difference between right and wrong if it's expedient for their politics. Do you think this actually helps Norway standing in the Arab world? And never mind that it's losing all respect and credibility in the West and among Israelis, but these other countries must surely see this problem as well.
Well, I'll tell you, I do think that the Norwegian people are definitely misinformed. Okay, what I see as what they are seeing, whether it is social media, through the media, through newspapers and TV channels, is so far away from the truth. I see a moral decay in institutions who are meant to protect and defend minorities and community, to fight against anti-Semitism. I mean, think how insane it is. The institution to come, for the memory of the Holocaust. How is it funded? How is it funded? It's funded by the money of Jews who were slaughtered in the Holocaust, Norwegian Jews. This is a project that Norwegian Jews paid in there with their lives, okay? During the Second World War, the money that was confiscated, stolen from them, have funded a whole project to try and remember the memory of the Holocaust, of the process of what had happened that led to such a moral decay, that have led to the Holocaust for the execution and the genocide of the Jews. These institutions have literally been taken over by an anti-Semite who is trying to push an anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish agenda. The institution who's meant to teach the lessons of the past is now echoing a propaganda that is emphasizing hatred towards Jews, who is creating a legitimacy for attacking Jews and the Jewish community in Norway. I mean, by demonizing Israel, the only Jewish state, by demonizing Jews, you create the climate of the same climate that have led to the process that, that mobilized, the Holocaust. And this is exactly the same process that we see now. I mean, I have family in Norway, okay? My uncle and my cousins, and one of my cousins felt she cannot live anymore in Norway. She was studying in university in Bergen while hiding in her apartment because on the main street there were massive protests calling, "Get the Zionists out. We don't want you here. We'll take you out from here." Where every class she would attend, she felt unsafe because people who talked, violently against Israel. So she only studied through Zoom, from distance. She now live in Israel, study here in Israel because she feel unsafe in Norway. So you need to echo that and understand how the Jewish community feels right now. I mean, the institutions who were meant to protect them have betrayed them and are echoing and legitimizing actions against Jews. There is no bigger absurdity from that. And I ask you, who's rising up? Who's being silent when you see all of that happening? Because silence, okay, is compliance. If you are silenced when those things are happening, you're no different than the one who are shouting and screaming and graffitiing, swastikas and call for the death of Jews and wave terrorist organizations' flags in your street in Oslo or in Bergen or anywhere else. You have to, if there's any lesson that we've learned, is that we cannot be silent. We have to speak out. We have to fight it. Otherwise, it will be too late. And let me remind you, it only starts with the Jews, okay? Christians will be next.
And the center you're speaking of is the HL Center, which we have been very critical of also on this podcast. And lately, one of the examples of what they're doing is this event they had with Omer Bartov, they invited, effectively creating like an equivalence between the Holocaust and Gaza.
There is nothing that desecrates, the memory of the Holocaust and the lessons from the Holocaust from that equation. It desensitized people to what the Holocaust really was, to the atrocities, to the killing, to the ways, and to the meaning of it. And what they are doing, they are desecrating the memory of the Holocaust. I mean, there is, when you are using those words, Nazis, Holocaust, genocide, okay, they have meaning. And they need to shock and rock every single person with a memory of what had happened there. A war is not a pretty thing. Don't think for a second I think that the war in Gaza is something pretty or romantic. It isn't. But there isn't a single war in the world, and it doesn't matter where it's Syria, Sudan, Ukraine, anywhere, that can be described in a romantic way, or there's no casualties or anything. But can you truly compare that to the Holocaust? When you try to do it in places where it's so far away and so different, you are desecrating it, okay? And you create a desensitization of the population to what had happened, okay? And then the memory and the lessons will be forgotten and pushed aside.
This infatuation and this obsession, I'd say, that the Norwegian government especially has with Palestine and recognizing the state of Palestine and their whole politics being based around Palestine. In fact, our last general election was almost like a Palestinian election here in Norway. How do you read that, Sharren? Like, what is this obsession with Palestine?
Oh, wow. I'll tell you what, there are two main organizations who are pushing the agenda of radical Islam towards Western democracies, countries who believe in freedom, in women's right, in freedom of expression, freedom of press, and so many others. Those 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 organizations that are the leading forces, the global leading forces of what is called the taking over of radical Islamist forces, is the IRGC and the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay? Now, they've spread literally armies, militaries, under the guise of whether it is criminal organizations who have weapons and territories and, funding and a lot of money um, all around the world. And it doesn't matter where it is in Sweden, where they've literally taken over a, criminal organization and they now control an entire city, or whether they've infiltrated to many other countries in Europe, or whether it is in Latin America, where Hezbollah, the army of the IRGC of Iran, have literally taken over most of the illegal trafficking routes of weapons and drugs, where 30% of their income of this terrorist organization come from there. Okay, so try and echo when Trump declared the not the mafia, the cartels as terrorist organization. He knew why he's doing it. He has the full proofs that the IRGC, Hezbollah, have taken over most of that operations, okay, and is literally building armies in those countries and in these territories by those means, okay? It happens everywhere around the world. But their global agenda of pushing Sharia and Islam, radical Islam, towards Western democracies is not just being fought by military fronts like that, by a lot on the media and social media. They invest a lot. They build mosques for conversions in many of those countries that are radicalizing the local population. They have an economical agenda of empowering, building, economical power in those countries to influence politics as well. In that radical Islamist agenda, and this is what you have to see, because many countries in Europe are digging their head in the sand, but this is a third world war, okay? Radical Islamist versus the power of freedom and democracy. And in that war, the Palestinians are a symbol, okay? They are a symbol because in the Middle East, what you've seen, for example, as a taking over conquest of Iran, of the IRGC. So in this war where the IRGC right now is leading even further than the Muslim Brotherhood, and you need to understand, here in the Middle East, they've already taken over so much land and power. Because you need to understand, before the 7th of October, they were already controlling Syria, creating a land corridor. So they were occupying Syria. For years now, they've been occupying Lebanon, controlling politics and the economy and the army through Hezbollah, their organization. This is literally an Iranian organization that's controlling Lebanon. When the sovereign government of Lebanon told the Iranian ambassador to leave, where they expelled him, he refused to leave because he very much knew that Iran is in control of the country. From a military perspective, economically, the corruption, everything. So the only country who's controlled by the Jews, which by them is considered haram, because infidels, non-Muslims are not allowed to hold any land, because this is a religious war. The Palestinians and the Israelis is a symbol in the Middle East to that holy cultural and religious war of jihad. And what we see now all around, you need to understand, and you have to start looking through Middle Eastern eyes and not European eyes on what is shaping and coming, because it's coming to you as well. It is already in your own front yard. What we're combating here in Israel is not a territorial war. If you look on the Ukraine-Russian war, this is a territorial war. You look on Sudan, it's a territorial war. You look on Syria, it's a regime change kind of war. So it's like a political war. What you see here in Israel is very different. So it's a religious and a cultural war, and it is the symbol of what's happening all around the world. And that's why Israel is, what's happening here is so important in so many Muslim countries where there's a huge movement of radical Islamists. Why you see it in your streets with radical Islamists as well, where they don't care about the elections in Norway. They care about jihad. They care about Islam. They care about the religious war that is happening, because that's going to dictate the outcome in Europe, in North America, in Latin America, and everywhere else in the world. And so, Norway looking through the glasses, the European glasses, thinking still, this is a territorial war, we can resolve it by territory, is so far away from reality. Okay, because you do not resolve a religious conflict by giving up territory. On the contrary, you just inflame it. And this is what happened in Gaza. We gave them a state. Gaza was their independent autonomy to rule and govern and develop. And what did they do? They invested all the money that was given to them and all their efforts in more war and prepare to the war of jihad. They elected a terrorist organization democratically to rule them and control them, because the religious war is far more important than anything else. And it blew up with the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Because if you don't address the deeper problem, which is a religious conflict, you will never resolve it. Okay, and that's why you have to fight those radicals. And I think that what you see today, quite a few years later on in Norway especially, is many politicians who are surrendering to a very radical voice that you hear in the streets. I mean, what Norway did with such a massive immigration and uncontrolled immigration as well, okay, is importing a lot of the radical people and the problems of the Middle East into Norway. If you didn't assimilate them to the Norwegian values of tolerance, of democracy, of women's rights, of freedom of speech, of peace, of what Norway always symbolized to the entire world, then they will continue to live in that Middle Eastern community where they imported a lot of those values and those challenges into your own country. So, what you see, for example, in countries like Pakistan and Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, you see schools who are teaching anti-Semitism. They demonize Jews. They say the Jews are the devil, that you're allowed to kill Jews. This is literally what they learn in schools. This is what they learn in mosques. This is what they learn at home. So you've imported the classical anti-Semitism that is being, a basic education in the Middle East into Europe. And then you mix it with the old and ancient Nazi radical anti-Semitism. and you get a Molotov bottle that is being exploded in your own streets. I mean, look on what they do in your streets. And this is not just in Norway, this is in London and in Paris, in New York and in Washington. They march in your streets with flags of terrorist organization who calls for the destruction of the West, of Western democracies, who burn the flags of your country, okay? Who tells you now that if the Norwegian flags have a cross like in London, that's offensive, okay? It is a religious war. And they support and march with flags of terrorist organization, chanting death slogans for the Jews and for the West. And you allow it just to go on. You don't just allow it. You embrace it. You see politicians who embrace it, who are marching with them, who are chanting those slogans, who are calling for their tradition and their radical culture to be absorbed, but it cannot live together. That comes at the expense of women's rights. And you see what's happening in England and in France and in different countries and how far it actually reached.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just have to ask you also specifically about the proposed new law here in Norway, the trade ban from the government want to ban trade with Israeli settlements in Palestinian territories, as they're saying, which is of course Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem, effectively criminalizing Norwegians going there and using the penal system for giving you up to 3 years of imprisonment for infraction on these laws. What do you think of this, Sharren?
Well, I think they continue to weaponize and politically appease these radical voices, but it's not going to end there. It's going to get worse, trust me. Okay? For you, not for Israel. This is an indication how your politicians are giving up on your values for the votes of the radical voices that are determining later on your political elections. I mean, think about it. And I really invite you. I want you to come to see some of those communities in the areas of Judea and Samaria and go into those factories. I mean, with a corrupt Palestinian authority that does not provide for their own people, where they steal their money. They give the money that you give them to terrorists who sits in prison so that they can reward killing of Jews and terrorist actions, where they steal the money to buy villas and palaces. And I can take you to see some of the palaces of Mahmoud Abbas and other very renowned Palestinian politicians. Millions of dollars have been invested in their palaces, beautiful palaces. Come and see them. And when more than 50% of the younger population of Palestinians are unemployed, why don't they invest those millions of dollars in infrastructure, in education, in workforces, in providing jobs? They don't care about that. And you come to the communities. Come and see how in the area of industry, Balkan, hundreds of Palestinians come every single day freely to come and work to provide for their families, where they earn 5 times the salaries of what they earn, in the Palestinian Authority, so they can provide for their children and put food on the table. How communities who are next to each other, Jews and Palestinians, invite each other to their home and celebrate with them. And the case of 4 Palestinians that came to celebrate Sukkot in a nearby town where they have friends. And the Palestinian Authority heard that those 4 Palestinians dared to come to a Jewish town and celebrate with Jews. And you know what they did to them? They've imprisoned them, tortured them, beaten them. So you tell me, how do you promote peace if it's not coexistence, mutual life, working side by side, living side by side? How do you really create life of peace between Arab and Jews, if not mutual life. But I told you, the Norwegian government have invested so much money in the conflict, in those conflict areas, in creating a reality of taking over land and putting illegal towns for Palestinians, who I have to say are very aggressive, have no intention of peace. Okay. And those are the conflict areas where they've invested money in a one-sided approach. Are you surprised that now they want to shut down the factory in Beckheim, where Palestinians and Jews are working and living side by side, where they create friendships? So it's very vividly that they have chosen a one side, and they are doing everything in their capability to push radicals and extremists to create confliction and literally war between us. And so, you know, we don't rely on, and those factories don't rely on the production or buying of Norwegian. I think this should be a huge red flag for Norwegian people, where your government think that you are incapable of creating your own moral compass, of determining your own facts and thinking for yourself and understanding what's moral and what's not. And they have to impose on you the moral values, okay, of that, what you call a global war between radical Islamists and the values of freedom. And in case you choose wrong, and in case you might think that the Jews are on the right and that maybe this approach is better than what they believe, they'll put you in prison for 3 years.
Mhm.
And I tell you, this is only the start. They will continue to do more and more and more. And this is something that every Norwegian should stand up and say, I'm sorry, I'm capable of thinking for myself in what I want to buy and what I want to support and what I don't want to support. And you have forced me for so many years to pay from my taxes to the Palestinian Authority to continue and indoctrinate and to eternalize the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by sending your money to the Palestinian Authority to create a reality in the field of literally taking over Jewish land by illegal occupation of Palestinians, and you've been paying for it. And this is just the next step up. Okay? Going to indoctrinate on what you can or cannot choose or do or buy.
Leif, you had a final question?
Yes, thank you so much for your time, Sharren. I just have, this is a totally different part of your life, but what does it mean for you and New Hope that Yuli Edelstein is breaking out of Likud? Does it mean anything at all?
Oh, wow. So internal politics here in Israel is very, very complicated.
I know. That's why I'm
Okay?
asking you.
There's like 45 parties who are going, at least, who are going to run in the general elections, around 12 to 14 parties who will enter the parliament, and then you need to sort of build coalitions. Look, I came from the Likud party. Okay, and this is how 11 years ago I started my political career. And unfortunately, 5-6 years ago, I decided to break off because I felt that on the right wing side of the map, we need to shape Israel in a different way. And right now, being part of the coalition, my party, New Hope, have actually decided to go and to assimilate back into the Likud party. And I told, the head of my party, Gideon Sa'ar, I'm not going to join back into the Likud, and that I want to continue and serve in the parliament under a right-wing party, but not in the Likud, because I feel it cannot represent our interests. I think that more and more members in the Likud party feel the same as well. because of the political climate that we're on right now. And I think not just Yuli, but quite a few more members are going to break off. And I really hope that we'll be able to build a one fraction in the right wing side. And I have to say that while we talk, there's been huge news. I don't know if you've been following up. There's the NATO conference in Turkey right now, where President Trump have actually announced that he feels the negotiation broke off and the ceasefire might be off. So that has huge meanings in regards to what will happen within the next days or weeks, and a huge implication of where we will be, Israel will be as well. And there was a huge fight between Erdogan and the prime minister, I think, of Greece as well, who said that Turkey is being a very aggressive force, which it has been. I mean, Turkey have been supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, which are a radical force as well. They've been more creating a more extremist climate within Turkey and outside of Turkey. They have shown some imperialistic approach, whether it is in Syria and other parts. You know, what you see in Syria right now is Turkey taking over more and more land, building schools, using the Turkish language, using the Turkish coin in those areas, building Turkish post offices. Okay, so their approach is very, very imperialistic in that kind of sense, and they feel like they've been leading the voice of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is quite dangerous. Okay, and should be indicated and talked about as well. So there's two major headlines that have been coming up as we speak that can change a lot in our regions.
Also, I read that it was problematic if Trump decides that U.S. can sell F-35 fighter jets to Turkey as well.
Yeah, look, we have major concerns because of the radicalization of Turkey and the population and the approach, especially of the foreign minister together with Erdogan as well. And, radicalization of a population, it's like a snowball that keeps on rolling and becoming bigger and bigger, and it gets out of control. And it will get out of their control. And right now, they feel in power. They feel very big and in control. But very easily, what we've learned from other radical regimes like that, they are the first one who will be out of power, while the religious leader are going to take and seize that power. And this is a very, very dangerous game that they're actually playing. And in that kind of game, there's the issue of balance of power. And the building of military power of Turkey is quite concerning in that sense. The selling of the airplane is quite concerning. But let me just remind you also, the strong bond and cooperation and partnership, okay, the alliance between Israel and America runs very deep. As much as the production of the airplanes, some of the most sophisticated and best quality airplanes are manufactured in America, some of the technology in those airplanes is being produced by Israel. The accuracy, I won't be able to say too much, but you need to understand from that, Israel will definitely not sell Turkey any kind of our high-tech military and security technology because of the threat, and especially the last couple of weeks where they have openly challenged and threatened Israel. So this should be also put on the table too.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East. But we thank you so much for your time, Sharren.
It's a
And
great
for
pleasure. Yeah, I'd be very happy anytime to come
Oh,
again
yeah. And good
to
luck with the
speak to you.
elections. We're following it as best we can.
Oh, thank you.
What
Yes,
list
it's
are
going
you
to be
going to,
difficult.
because you're going to run for election again. What list are you going to be on if you're not
So
going to be part of the?
I can tell you, I'll be able to announce it to you next week or in a couple of weeks. It will be on a right-wing platform.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we noticed you have pictures of
Not the liquid, yeah.
Jabotinsky and
Yeah,
Begin behind you, you know.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, two of my spiritual leaders and ideological example that I carry with me.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
people think of them as just very right wing in Norway, but they don't realize they were also staunch libertarians.
Absolutely, absolutely. They are the foundation, the fathers who have put that here in Israel into a political party and into a political movement.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sharren, and
Thank
we'll
you.
definitely invite you back on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thanks a lot.